Morning. The foundation of every Christian principle, as I said at the beginning of Mass, is the fact of the resurrection. That Jesus rose from the dead. Do you believe it? Good, thank you. It's something to be contemplated. And it's best to contemplate that in imagining what a real-life situation would be. You know, some of you have lost people in the last year. That's what all these carnations here are represented from our memorial Mass this past week. Maybe you lost somebody longer ago. But imagine, if you would, for a moment, that person suddenly walking through the side door into this church and standing in front of you. And simply saying, "Good morning." How would you react? Would you believe? Would you be afraid? Nervous? You probably would. I certainly would be. Because you would know that there was something divine, something outside of the norm that was operating at this very moment when you saw that person suddenly come back from the dead. Friends, today in the Gospel, the Sadducees approached Jesus. Now it's important to remember that the Sadducees and the Pharisees were two different religious groups at the time in the first century of Jesus. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection or had some inclination of it. The Sadducees did not. This 20th chapter of Luke is immediately preceded by the Pharisees coming to Jesus. That's what they're doing, coming back and forth. They're trying to compete with his power because he's bad for business. And so the Pharisees present him with that question, is it lawful to pay the tax to Caesar? They ask a question because they want to trap him. If Jesus says, no, don't pay the tax to Caesar, that means he's charged with treason for rebelling against the emperor. If he says, yes, pay the tax to the emperor, he's telling all of his religious friends that, yeah, Caesar's the God. Caesar's the real God, and he would be accused of blasphemy, of pagan worship. And so what does he tell them in that episode? He says and asks them a question back, whose image is on this coin? What do they say? Caesar's image. And he says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. Well, what is God's? So he turns it around them. What is God's? Well, who is God's image stamped on? Well, all of you, created in God's image and likeness. God does not deal in coins, he deals in souls, human souls. And so when the Sadducees approach him today, they're trying to trap him. So they ask him a question because they asked him a question defined by the terms that they can understand. They're very earthly terms of marriage. And so they present an impossible case to him in earthly terms. They say, all right, a man has a wife, the man dies, his brother, it says in the law, is responsible to take care of her and raise up children, descendants, and they keep going on. This happens 7 times. I'm not sure what was wrong with the lady, why she had 7 husbands, but that's what they asked. Maybe there was something wrong with the guys, I don't know. But they present this impossible case to Jesus because they think they have him trapped and there's no answer. But he very quickly reminds them what? You're trying to apply to heaven earthly terms. You're looking at things and people as being possessed, one by the other. But in heaven, all possess equally God. And God, in turn, possesses equally all things. And so he turns it around on them, even using scripture saying that Moses talked to God and said, God is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living, the God of Isaac, Jacob, Moses, those patriarchs who had died, who still stood before the face of God. I think every one of us can struggle with that temptation, to apply a sort of earthly conditioning onto heaven. Now, I hear this very oftentimes in comment boxes on the internet. Atheists will go on there. They call them, is everyone familiar with what trolls are on the internet? Trolls, they go in and they look for ways they can start arguments and fights, and then they put their comment on there anonymously and try to get people riled up, and they do. Ignore them, by the way. And they'll often go on the internet and they'll ask questions that they think they're trapping Christians and people who believe in God. They'll ask questions like, can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? And somehow you think, well, gee, I don't know if there's an answer to that. Well, it must mean that maybe God doesn't exist. Or, it's another question they ask, who created God? Well, geez, I don't know. Well, when they ask those questions, it's clear that they don't understand what we mean by God. God who is the first cause, the unmoved mover, the one who created the universe out of nothing, the God who has power to do all that he wills, including raising Jesus from the dead. Because the Sadducees' and the Pharisees' minds are limited by earthly categories, they cannot conceive of life of love outside of this world, a love that goes beyond all particular loves, and in today's case, in particular, marriage. All human love is nothing more than a spark of the great flame of love of God. That's what Bishop Fulton Sheen used to say. And I think we know this. When I prepare couples for marriage, very oftentimes they come into my office, I think, with the mentality that this marriage will solve my quest for happiness. And I simply direct them to somebody who's been married for more than 5 years. And they realize better. It's the Jerry Maguire theology, huh? That movie years ago, Jerry Maguire, he's in the elevator, there's two deaf people, and one says to the other one, you complete me. Anyone who's actually tried that ends up failing. You see, friends, we are very oftentimes prisoners of finitude. Prisoners of finitude. We have desires in our heart that go beyond anything in the world can give us. God gave us that. What for? As a clue. To reach beyond what we see, to go into the depths of God's very love for us. That is where the human heart, the infinite longing, is ultimately satisfied. So today, those questions that the Sadducees asked Jesus, and you understand that they did not believe in the resurrection, and that's what made them sad, you see. That's what made them sad, you see. It's a little joke. It takes years to get used to my humor. What kind of prisons are you trapped in? Our conception of freedom is so often defined as freedom from anything holding us back. And I see so often young people and older people as well, because I visited prisons, visited jails. They run with a false notion of freedom into a prison cell and never realize that the gate is being locked behind them. And they feel trapped. Friends, this world, because it's finite, if we can see nothing beyond it, becomes a prison. Why do you think in your jobs sometimes you feel like you're stuck? In your marriages, you feel like you're stuck. In your relationships, you feel like you're stuck. In our political system, you feel like you're stuck. Because nothing in this world was meant to satisfy our hearts completely for what they were made for. And that's God. And that's through the resurrection. The world offered us beyond this life. Take a few moments this week to pray. The way out of being trapped is to prayer. Go through prayer because it opens your minds and your hearts to something that goes beyond. What does the world tell you? Stay away from religion. It's a trap. They want to tell you what to do. I tell you, friends, in the confessional, how many people have I had the privilege to release from their prisons of addiction, from their prisons of worshiping their own ego, from the freedom that they've been sold and end up trapped. Don't get trapped. Pray. You know, I know I sing during Mass, right? I chant some of the prayers, and people usually have two reactions. Oh, that's nice, Father. The other reaction is, oh gosh, this is going to take longer than I expected. But do the math. Add the minutes up. There's no added minutes. Do you know why I sing? Because singing is eternal. Singing gives us a sense of the eternal. Why, when you go into a car and you're about to take a drive alone, what's the first thing you do? Turn on the radio. Turn on music you like. Why? Because it makes the time pass faster. Does time passing faster? No. But you're moving your mind into a different dimension. So, if you feel trapped in your life, can I make a suggestion? Come to the church and pray for 20 minutes. If you got kids, fine. Switch with your spouse. Drop them off with the grandparents. Sorry, grandparents. You will never regret praying. You discover a new freedom when you pray, because you're opening up your mind to that end that God has prepared for you, an end that you can never be trapped into, but gives you true freedom. And so, friends, today we listen to our gospel. We contemplate what it really means to say, I believe in God the Father Almighty and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, who suffered, died, and rose from the dead, giving us the true freedom our hearts will always long for. Tap into that freedom this week.